What if I told you that a single letter written nearly 2,000 years ago contains the blueprint for solving every relationship drama, workplace conflict, and personal crisis you'll face this year? The Apostle Paul's first letter to the Corinthians isn't just ancient history. It's a masterclass in human psychology, conflict resolution, and building unbreakable communities that modern businesses pay millions to consultants to understand. Picture this. You're living in ancient Corinth, the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire. It's a city where anything goes, money talks loudest, and moral boundaries are suggestions rather than rules. Into this chaos steps a small group of new Christians trying to figure out how to live differently while surrounded by a culture that celebrates excess. Sound familiar? Welcome to 1 Corinthians. Paul wrote this letter around 57 AD to address the complete meltdown happening in the Corinthian church. These weren't minor disagreements about what to serve at potluck dinners. We're talking about full-scale divisions, sexual scandals that shocked even pagans, lawsuits between believers, and spiritual pride that would make modern influencers blush. The problems were so intense that reports reached Paul hundreds of miles away in Ephesus. The letter opens with Paul establishing his credibility as an apostle called by God's will, immediately partnering with Sosthenes. This wasn't just name-dropping. Paul needed authority because he was about to deliver some hard truths to people who thought they had Christianity figured out. He reminds them that they're sanctified and called to be saints, not because they're perfect, but because of what Christ accomplished for them. Then comes the first bombshell. Paul addresses the toxic divisions splitting their community apart. Some claim to follow Paul, others Apollos, still others Peter, and some even claim to follow Christ exclusively. Paul's response cuts through the celebrity worship culture. Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in Paul's name? He reveals that human wisdom, no matter how impressive it sounds, becomes foolishness when compared to God's wisdom demonstrated through Christ's crucifixion. The cross becomes Paul's central theme throughout the letter. In a culture obsessed with strength, success, and sophistication, Paul argues that God chose what seems weak and foolish to shame the wise and strong. This wasn't just theology. It was revolutionary social commentary that turned Roman values upside down. Paul then shifts to address their spiritual immaturity. Despite their impressive spiritual gifts, they were acting like babies, unable to handle solid spiritual food. They were jealous, quarrelsome, and sectarian, behaviors that revealed their carnality. True spiritual maturity, Paul explains, involves recognizing that human leaders are merely servants through whom people believe, not the source of growth itself. The letter takes a shocking turn when Paul confronts sexual immorality that even pagans found disturbing. A man was having relations with his stepmother, and the church was actually proud of their tolerance. Paul demands immediate action, using language so strong it would make modern readers uncomfortable. He establishes principles for church discipline that prioritize restoration over reputation. But Paul doesn't stop with internal issues. He addresses believers taking each other to secular courts, arguing that if Christians will one day judge angels, surely they can resolve disputes among themselves. This section provides timeless principles for conflict resolution that modern mediators still use today. The practical applications intensify as Paul tackles marriage and singleness. Contrary to popular misconceptions, Paul highly values marriage while also recognizing the unique advantages of singleness for ministry. His advice balances idealism with realism, acknowledging that people have different callings and circumstances. Food sacrifice to idols becomes a case study in Christian freedom and responsibility. Paul establishes a principle that knowledge without love becomes destructive pride. He argues that having the right to do something doesn't always make it wise or loving. True spiritual maturity considers how our actions affect weaker believers. Paul's discussion of spiritual gifts reaches its climax with the famous love chapter. After establishing that spiritual gifts should build up the community rather than showcase individual superiority, he presents love as the most excellent way. His definition of love isn't romantic sentiment, but practical action characterized by patience, kindness, and selflessness. Speaking in tongues becomes another teachable moment about order and edification in worship. Paul doesn't forbid the practice, but insists it should build up the church, rather than confuse outsiders or create spiritual elitism. Everything should be done decently and in order. The resurrection receives Paul's most thorough theological treatment. Facing skeptics who questioned bodily resurrection, Paul presents Christ's resurrection as the foundation of Christian faith. Without it, he argues, believers are to be pitied above all people. He describes the future resurrection body as imperishable and glorious, transforming our understanding of death itself. The letter concludes with practical instructions about the collection for Jerusalem's poor believers, travel plans, and personal greetings. These seemingly mundane details reveal Paul's pastoral heart and the interconnectedness of early Christian communities. 1 Corinthians remains startlingly relevant because it addresses timeless human issues: pride, division, sexuality, conflict resolution, spiritual maturity, and community building. Paul's solutions aren't quick fixes, but fundamental shifts in perspective that prioritize love over personal rights, unity over individual preferences, and spiritual maturity over impressive displays. The letter's enduring power lies in its realistic portrayal of Christian community. Paul doesn't present an idealized church, but addresses real people with real problems, offering practical wisdom grounded in theological truth. Whether you're navigating workplace politics, family conflicts, or personal relationships, 1 Corinthians provides a framework for building healthy communities that can withstand any pressure our modern world throws at them.